Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us. I'm Robb Emmett, and I'm a video director, editor, and the owner of a video production company called Win-Win Productions. Today, I'm producing this webinar with some business colleagues of mine who are specialists in some different areas, and they're going to discuss some ideas that are important for non-for-profit organizations to understand. How does a nonprofit come back successfully from a historic pandemic and economic shutdown? That's the overarching theme of this webinar series. And today's episode is called Don't Forget Your People. Today, we'll talk about rebuilding your organization's culture after the shutdown. How do you build your teams again after your people have been apart and may have had very different experiences during the COVID-19 shutdown? How do you manage their changed work preferences after they've been working remotely for so long? We'll have a brief introduction about this topic from our featured panelist, Erlain, and then the panelists will discuss. We're not taking live questions in this webinar. However, if you have a question, send it to me at my email address and I will pass it on to the panelists and they'll get back to you by email. Right now, I'd like to introduce the panelists. First, Jennifer Denil is the owner of JD Financial Associates. She is a certified public accountant who provides fractional financial controller services to closely held businesses. Jennifer assists her clients with understanding cash flows, increasing profitability, and identifying cost savings from operational efficiencies. Her clients benefit from her 30 years of financial experience without the cost commitment of a full-time employee. Most recently, she has assisted many companies of varying sizes with navigating the CARES Act funding opportunities. Next, Bill Hassett and .org Services provide strategy and revenue thinking and action for nonprofits across the Chicagoland area. Bill uses his many years of accounting, financial, and nonprofit board experience to help nonprofit leadership think through their ideas and their strategy, basically their why us. He also challenges them to think about how they carry out their mission. The size of the nonprofits he serves range from the startup idea, recently invented around a kitchen table, to the third generation agency that needs to prepare for new challenges. He even works with the final stage agency that has the courage to merge or partner when it can't achieve success on its own. Bill was a partner in a CPA firm for many years and has served on more than a dozen nonprofit boards in roles that included all of the board officer positions, including board chair. He welcomes the chance to talk nonprofit with people interested in accomplishing community helping action. Finally, our featured panelist is Erlain. She's the founder of Peak Development Strategies. She believes an organization's foundation is their people, their employees, their management, and their owners. She is a published author of business books. Her most recent book addresses the opportunities and challenges of the multi-generational workforce. Generational diversity is a root cause of many of the problems in business today that affect growth, productivity, and profitability. Generational diversity is a root cause of many of the problems in business today that affect growth, productivity, and profitability. Mary says, as the constraints of doing business ease due to the pandemic, don't forget your people. She believes that a culture needs to be rebuilt in order for a business to sustain itself going forward. And that's the topic of today's episode, Don't Forget Your People. And we'll start with a brief overview of the topic from Mary, then open it up for the whole panel to discuss and wrap it up in about half an hour. So let's begin. Mary, what do non-for-profits need to do now to successfully reboot their organizational culture?
Well, thanks, Rob, and thank you for doing these webinars. I know I have learned much working with my colleagues. Let me define culture a little bit. When you have an organization of more than 2 people, you have a culture. Basically what that is, it's the collective attitudes and behaviors that end up creating durable ways that people work together. Culture ultimately defines what's encouraged, discouraged, accepted, and rejected, both within a group as well as supported by leadership and management. The longer an organization is together, the more the culture becomes ingrained in the organization, and it does take much effort for that culture to shift. That culture can shift also when a very powerful or high-ranking person in an organization leaves. The culture needs to reboot. In this current situation, such as the pandemic, We've sent the staff to be working from home. Again, that has fractured the culture. We'll develop that in a little bit. Other ways that the culture is impacted, especially in the nonprofit community, is when organizations are merging with others. Trying to take and weave two ingrained cultures together is not easy, and oftentimes that's the one area that is not given enough attention. There's a lot of attention that goes into financial merging and merging of donors, brands, websites, but sadly the people do get forgotten, and that's why I said don't forget the people. In this current pandemic situation, I know there is going to be a lot of shifting going on in the nonprofit community, and I'm hoping to take a deeper dive with that with my colleagues on this call. So, you know, when we're looking right now in the pandemic with PPP money, and now that ever-changing, seems like every day new guidelines are coming out, you know, the financial piece is such a swirl and a confusing place for people to navigate with donors, with money, resources drying up. And then we question about the grant writing going forward. That financial piece, as well it should, is taking center stage. But at the same time, behind all of that are people. And then additionally, when we're looking at this ever-changing place, we're looking at the 5 generations in the workplace. And I've written books on this topic. It is a passion. It's woven into everything that I do. But currently, you know, we have to make very strategic decisions about the 5 generations as they are operating inside of these organizations. It is clear that, you know, the organizations, in order to sustain and survive, have perhaps had to get a little more leaner in the staff area. But using the idea that, you know, the baby boomers were struggling with technology, let's get rid of them, or you know, let's just bring in more millennials. You know, we need to use that generational piece very strategically and carefully. We don't have an attorney, you know, as part of this webinar series, but that would be one individual, an employment law attorney or an HR specialist that understands the law before you make some mistakes when it comes to laying off any of the staff. Those 5 generations have a lot to offer as a way to rebuild and reboot culture, and a way to bring these organizations into a new organization going forward that in essence, the word is overused, but in essence, it's accurate. They need to pivot. So I'd like to take a deeper dive on these topics with my colleagues.
Good. Mary, I might turn this just slightly and speak from a board perspective. As a member of a board of directors, when we're remote from the day-to-day, and we know that things have changed and circumstances have changed, and we don't necessarily have the expertise to make decisions or even help management make the right decisions about positioning people, how to have them reenter, et cetera. But I think through some of the work you've done, for example, on a nonprofit I serve on, you and your expertise can really assess what kind of change might be needed, where people are at, what kind of change would be needed, and where does that take the organization. Maybe you could speak a little bit more about that kind of.
Yes, we have some assessment instruments that we use. We have an organizational analysis that can look at the organization from many viewpoints. But in the engagement that you're speaking about, we did a culture assessment, you know, so that the board does work with the organization and oversees the organization, but yet, you're right, is removed from the day-to-day. So what we did is we interviewed every single employee, manager, executive director off of the same set of questions that gave us an insight to really what is the operating culture there. How much are they ingrained in, well, first off, are there core values? And how much are they getting around those core values as the operating principles? Do they know the mission of the organization, and are they all on the same page regarding the mission and vision? And we came back with a very extensive report to the board that gave them basically the good news. And in this case, there was much to share, that there was an outstanding group of people inside that organization, but at the same time, we discovered some gaps that the board itself and the leadership can get around and make some strategic decisions going forward. It isn't like I think this is going on, or I feel this is going on. You're given accurate data by which the organization can grow and sustain itself going forward. So then another one is determining what a target culture is. There is a culture inside of an organization, and there are different kinds of culture. You may have and definitely in the social service side of nonprofits, you're going to have more of a caring and purpose-driven culture. And in essence, that becomes the center focus by which decisions are made, by which behaviors are accepted or not accepted. In an organization that is more knowledge-based, you may have a learning culture where the organization is always striving to add a new knowledge base with their staff. So then there are visionary type organizations. So there are several different ways, 7 in the work we do, that define the culture. And that was the culture prior to the pandemic. But bringing people back who have been affected by this shelter in place and frankly, even the current challenges that we are having have been affected. So you're not necessarily getting the same people back, meaning they have the same names, faces, and social security numbers, but how they have operated from home and now are coming back to work, the stipulations that we're putting in place in the work environment, where you have half working from home and half working in the organization, the old culture, not everybody may fit going forward, as you also are, as an organization, are exploring new opportunities. So a lot of time and attention needs to be paid to what is the new culture in this new vision of your organization going forward, and who do I have that can actually take charge and lead the organization forward? And then perhaps who are the naysayers who may need to find a new opportunity in another organization going forward?
So Mary, I have a question. Are you seeing then that this could possibly be an opportunity where maybe an organization has not paid attention to their culture in the past, and now they can be more intentional about their culture versus just letting it evolve naturally? They can maybe is there something leaders can do to be a driver or communicate that vision of how they want an organization to operate culturally?
Yes, absolutely. And that is one of the assessments that we do. One thing they can also do is take some time to reflect, maybe take a period of time prior to the shelter in place and current challenges that we are in, and do a SWOT analysis. What were your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities and threats prior to all of this taking place? And then maybe take a look at the last 3 months and do the same exact exercise and compare. And also then define what your target culture could be in the organization, and yes, be very intentional about bringing the people back together again. It's not quite like starting with a clean slate, but it's about as close to a clean slate as you possibly can, because we've had this out of office operations going on. Coming back in the office, you can, in essence, approach it as an opportunity, not necessarily a challenge.
Mary, in working with your clients, what would be like one trend, one positive trend you see happening within leadership where they seem to be approaching restarting after the shutdown in a good way in terms of building their culture? And what is a trend that is a red flag for you when you work for clients?
A red flag? Well, I was going to look at it as an opportunity, and that is the shelter in place has offered leadership as well as staff a lot of time to educate themselves. So they have been able to listen to webinars and podcasts and educate and understand, because there are folks like us carrying this message, that they're more educated than they ever have been in the past. Additionally, another red flag is getting used to just focusing on the finance, the acronyms like PPP and CARES Act, and a red flag would be just solely focusing on that aspect of the business and not on the staff issues. So
I have to agree with that. I'm actually advising my clients with regard to the PPP forgiveness. Don't worry about the loan being forgiven. Operate your entity making good business decisions, making effective business decisions that need to be made, and the money will flow itself out as it needs to, and the government is loosening up the guidelines as we speak. So just coming back to what you said, Mary, focus on your organization, focus on your culture, focus on your key drivers, and let those be your primary decisions. Don't let CARES Act and PPP be your primary decision maker.
Mm-hmm. So another key, and there are many software tools you can use, actually, business consultants and coaches in managing this process, and that is looking at performance management. That may need, that had to be completely retooled when you're working from home. And how is it that you manage and lead people in terms of just accountability to hours worked, projects completed, going forward? Basically, leaders and managers got a crash course in that, in middle to late March. But how do you do that going forward, having people literally working from home? We have the concept of hoteling, and realizing we don't necessarily need everybody in the office. There are performance management tools, and you have to walk that fine line of good accountability and micromanagement. Nobody likes to be micromanaged. And some of this performance management needs to be very individualized. There are some that do appreciate more check-ins, and then there are those that appreciate more trust. And again, this is paying attention and understanding delegation levels, accountability levels of each individual employee. Now, that sounds like a lot of time, but maybe a little bit of time on that front end will pay off in droves in the long term, because you'll have more engaged employees, you'll have better data, and you will, in essence, build a foundation of trust as the basis of all team building.
Go
ahead, Bill.
Thank you. Sorry. I'm also thinking that because people are remote and there's less opportunity to frequently check in, that maybe being a little clearer in your communications and maybe setting up a little more of a process around sharing information, directing someone on a task, what are the objectives, but just being a little more formal about it could be a process that becomes part of the culture as kind of an unexpected benefit of people working remote from each other.
Sure. And you look at, we're on one great tool right now, and that is Zoom. We can have a morning huddle, and whether we have, if we were 4 people in an office and we were where 2 people are working and 2 people are home, we can all climb on Zoom and huddle up in the morning. We don't have to worry, at least the 2 people working from home don't have to worry about being late for the meeting because we're fighting traffic and trains are late and so on and so forth. So this is probably a wonderful tool that people can use going forward as an accountability piece. It also can streamline communication through the features of sharing screens and so on. And Zoom isn't the only game in town. There are a host of software. So this can be performance management. Because there is an app for that, you can, as a leader, have a one-to-one with people. So this has been a lesson in perhaps maybe not resisting technology, but actually using it to your advantage and having quick in and out meetings, as opposed to, all sitting in a conference room drumming our nails, waiting for the last person to join us. This can actually streamline and improve performance management, and hopefully leaders of organizations and managers will begin to take tools like this going forward. Other things are building apps on phones. There are a host of tools. So using technology now to our advantage. And then the last thing I wanted to focus on was the strategic plan. Any organization, whether for-profit or nonprofit, they should have a strategic plan, but the one you had is now out of date. Strategically, there may be a slight pivot for some organizations, and then there are those that it pretty much is out the window. This is a time for board members to begin to get around the idea of a strategic plan. But the more you can include the individuals and the staff members in to at least be able to share their voice, the better the strategic plan will be. It's also an exercise that can go a long way in redeveloping a culture. This is where the 5 generations come into play, because strategically there may be some ideas that perhaps a longstanding board had never considered, and perhaps people of other generations may have some wonderful ideas on how to carry a message, build the brand, increase fundraising. I've seen it myself. My son's girlfriend works for one of those large nonprofits that are, jutting out, from the lakeshore in the city, and she's the social media director. And all of those nonprofits pretty much had to close, and social media was the only game in town to be able to, continue to carry a message. She became an absolutely essential worker, as many other social media and marketing people in organizations have. So that is a new part of the strategic plan, is completely redoing a marketing plan.
I don't know that this is something that can be answered right now, but I think there's in a lot of organizations, in my own, there's a sense of, when will I know I'm back in business? Like, when will I know we're back up and running and we can kind of leave the pandemic behind? Some of that has to do, I know, with the rules of the state and the work rules and, which phase we're in. But internally, what are the indicators you would look for as in leadership to know that, okay, we're kind of back in business here?
Well, a social organization would be someone where we're now serving the numbers, whatever the numbers are, whether you're serving the homeless, the poor, people, cause-related around a disease. When we are back out into what they define as the community and are serving. Other organizations, it's when we're able to open the doors and let people in. But I think the thing that's going to be the challenge is that what used to look like work inside the organization, meaning if we were a collective group of people, we're all back in the office working like it used to be. That may never happen, and that truly becomes a decision based on an individual organization. And again, that's something people need to pay attention, is there are those that are going to long for the good old days. And that's something to be aware of and lead and manage to, and also give a voice around, and not just say, what, they're going to get used to it. No, it's a matter of giving people that opportunity to be able to speak to that and explain, why the organization is going in this direction, as opposed to just expecting people to follow. That can be, the worst thing people can do is not give a voice.
It was something that occurs to me, Mary, is again, as a board member, an organization may assemble a reentry plan and may be thinking more about finances, about the physical requirements of the space they're going to reoccupy. Technology may change and things of that nature. But I think you're saying that those are all great, but they're incomplete without looking at the way the team is going to interact differently. And perhaps the way they interact with their customers is going to be different too, but the way they interact with each other is a key part of that reentry plan.
Absolutely. And that's where the colleagues, on this call, when I'm looking at Jennifer from the financial perspective, when I'm looking at Robb in being able to carry the message, and how is it that we're able to carry the message and be effective, and we don't all have to be in the same room. And then with you and your expertise, both with your financial background as well as your longstanding service inside of boards and understand from the inside, that's where, as a package, an organization engaging with us strategically at different times can, in essence, give them that chance of sustainability first and foremost, but then also setting them in a place where they can grow and serve more, which is what ultimately nonprofits are about, is service.
Okay. We have a few minutes left. Is any final questions for Mary from either Jen or?
Mary, are you seeing any trends in terms of the 5 generations and how they have accepted the recent months of working remotely and now needing to come back to the office, and maybe there being some resistance there or some openness to more remote working from, say, an older generation? Are you seeing any trends in that at all?
It's interesting. I'm hearing from people both in for and nonprofit, where, it's been great working at home, but the fact that I had to homeschool my kids too, there are people that are younger that are dying to get back, in the office, because the working from home thing wasn't exactly working. Then, I think it is generationally driven, but I think a lot of it is our personalities. So yes, there are some generational stereotypes, but there are people like me, who's a people person. All of you know that. That's not a surprise to you. That, I crave the human connection. I laugh. I bought a new car recently, and I was hanging out with this car salesperson. I was actually really excited to be with somebody who was not my family. That's how desperate I am. So I think it's also personality based, and how much we thrive on human contact. Then there are those who love the efficiency, and then there are those who actually appreciate the isolation. Not wrong, just different. And again, thank you for the question, because I think that's also part of the conversation is we need to find out what people's preferences are, and can we as an organization lean into those a little bit without negatively impacting the team or the organization.
So a best practice right now could be, before you make your new strategic plan, is to do a survey of your people, or just have extended conversations with all of them to figure out where are we really at, so that you don't have such a top-down, one-size-fits-all plan that doesn't fit anybody very well. You want to avoid that, right?
Yeah, it's like one-size-fits-all clothing, not so much.
Not so much.
Yeah, can there be more flexibility in the way that people do their work, whether it's in the office or remotely, that still achieves the goals that need to be achieved? Can there be more flexibility in that? And I think from what I'm seeing out with my clients, there's going to be a lot of openness to that flexibility. You're going to see more people working part-time in the office, part-time at home, kind of some of both, not really 100% of either. So it's going to be interesting, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, these are interesting times. So we've come to the end of this episode, so we need to wrap it up here. I want to thank Mary for preparing all of that for us, and the panel, as well as the viewers here. Thank you for joining us. We do have one more episode in this webinar series for non-for-profits left. I will be the featured panelist in the next episode, and we'll discuss how video can be a vital and versatile tool for non-for-profits to help them stay top of mind with donors and out in front of potential clients, so everyone knows what their services are and what they're providing and how they've had to adjust. So video is a great tool for that. We'll talk about that next time. And lastly, if you have questions about creating video content during the shutdown to keep in touch with clients or donors, creating video to promote your organization on social media, or if you'd like help facilitating webinars like this one, please contact me if you'd like to talk more. Also, take a look at my website for some samples of my work. I'm Robb Emmett with Win-Win Productions. Thanks for joining us today. We hope you're well and able to work through these interesting times. Feel free to follow up with questions to our panelists too. They'll be happy to talk with you further. So thank you and have a good day, everyone.